The African sun poured its golden fire over the endless expanse of savanna, igniting every blade of grass with a glow that seemed to come from another world. The land stretched in all directions, ancient and proud, painted in hues of amber, ochre, and shadow, a place where life danced on the knife's edge between beauty and brutality. Herds of gazelles shimmered in the heat haze, zebras painted the horizon with black and white brushstrokes, and the air carried the intoxicating mix of dust, wind, and something older than memory. In this timeless kingdom lived Zura, the lioness, whose very presence commanded the attention of the land itself. Her sleek, muscular frame seemed sculpted from the spirit of the plains, her amber eyes mirrors of 1,000 sunsets, her every movement a symphony of grace and power. She was the queen of her pride, the mother of her cubs, the living emblem of survival. But on this morning, the crown she wore so naturally was heavy with pain. A black rubber noose, the remnant of some careless human discard, was cinched mercilessly around her torso, digging into her flesh just behind her forelegs. An old tire, foreign and ugly against her golden coat, had become her jailer. Each step was a battle, every breath a sharp reminder of her prison. She staggered rather, then strode, her once commanding gait reduced to a desperate shuffle. Hunger gnawed at her ribs. Her roars had faded into hoarse whispers. The savannah, her throne, had become a cruel arena where she could no longer hunt. She clawed at the tire, teeth scraping rubber, but it would not yield. Overhead, the sun seemed to mock her suffering, spotlighting her struggle while life all around her went on untouched. The gazelles leaping without fear, the zebras grazing in peace. In her amber eyes was not just pain, but a silent plea, not to the wind, not to the herd, but to something greater. For even the mightiest are brought low when the shadow of humanity falls across the wild. The Lord is near to the broken-hearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Miles away, beyond the reach of the midday heat, shadows moved beneath the sheltering arms of ancient acacia trees. In this green cathedral, where sunlight dappled the ground in gold coins, a gentle giant walked with quiet purpose. Keto, the great silverback gorilla, elder of his troop, was foraging, his massive hands sifting through tender shoots and ripe figs with a patience that spoke of wisdom earned over many seasons. His eyes, deep and reflective, carried the calm authority of one who knew his place in the delicate balance of the wild. Gorillas are often misjudged, their size mistaken for savagery, but those who look closely see the truth. They are watchers, guardians, keepers of the forest's heartbeat. Today, Keto moved slowly through the tall grass until a flicker of tawny fur drew his gaze. He paused, every muscle still, his brow furrowing, a lioness. Normally, instinct would have whispered caution. Lions are to be avoided, their hunger unpredictable, but this lioness was different. Her steps were wrong, halting. Her chest rose and fell too quickly. Then he saw it, the black ring strangling her body. Not natural. Not right. His instincts screamed retreat, yet something deeper rose within him, a current of empathy older than fear. Keto saw not a predator, but a sister of the wild in need. He had seen many struggles in his years, hunger, drought, rivalries. But this injury was no act of nature. It was human-made, and it did not belong here. In that moment, Keto decided. He could not free her himself, but he knew the strange, noisy creatures who could, humans, the ones who sometimes brought help to the broken. It was a risk, yes, but compassion overruled caution. With a grunt of resolve, he turned his great frame toward the edge of the reserve. Defend the weak and the fatherless. Uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed. At the far edge of the reserve, where the wild brushed shoulders with human effort, a small outpost stood weathered by sun and time. Here lived those rare souls who had made the wild their calling, the rangers. Inside the modest station, Asha, a seasoned ranger with skin kissed by 1,000 dawns, was cleaning her tranquilizer rifle with the precision of a surgeon. Her eyes, sharp but kind, held stories untold. Beside her, Javier, younger, restless, always ready, was checking the patrol vehicle's fuel. Outside, the cicadas droned and the wind whispered secrets through the grass. Then came the sound, deep, resonant hoots, urgent and strange. The rangers froze. Aisha's gaze met Habir's. "That's a gorilla," she said slowly, "but not like I've ever heard before." They stepped outside, cautious but curious, rifles at the ready. And there he was, Quito, the massive silverback, stood just beyond the fence, not charging, not threatening, but signaling. He thumped his chest lightly, then extended one enormous finger toward the plains. He looked back at them, eyes burning with something unspoken, then pointed again. Aisha's instincts, honed over decades, told her this was no accident. "He's asking us to follow," she breathed. Habir frowned. "Or leading us into a trap." But when he met Quito's gaze, the doubt faded. There was urgency there, not malice. "Get the cutters." "And a net," Aisha ordered. "And the sedatives, just in case." Moments later, they were ready. Quito turned and began to walk, pausing often to be sure they followed. It was a sight to steal breath, a gorilla leading humans into the heart of the wild, bound together by an unspoken trust. Two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. The savannah opened before them like a page in an ancient book, every step bringing them closer to the story's climax. Heat shimmered on the horizon, and the air was thick with the scent of dust and grass. Then they saw her, Zura, the queen, brought low, her flanks heaving, the cruel band cutting into her flesh. Aisha's breath caught. Habir muttered a quiet curse under his breath, already moving to prepare the tranquilizer. Quito stopped a respectful distance away, settling into the grass, his great frame watchful but still, as if standing guard over her dignity. The rangers worked quickly. A gentle hiss, the whisper of a dart's flight, and Zura's weary body began to relax. Kneeling beside her, Aisha's hands were sure as she cut the thick rubber. It fell away with a heavy thud, leaving behind raw grooves in her golden fur. Habir checked her breathing, his face softening. "She's going to make it," he said. Quito's dark eyes met Aisha's then, and in that moment, species, fear, and history all faded. There was only shared relief, shared humanity, though. One of them was not human. As the sedative wore off, Zura stirred. Her eyes opened, meeting Aisha's first, then Quito's. She rose slowly, stretching, the pain already easing. For a moment, the three of them stood there, lioness, gorilla, human, in a triangle of impossible connection. Then, with a low, rumbling purr that was almost gratitude, Zura turned and walked back into her kingdom, free once more. Quito watched her go, then melted back into the shadows of his forest. And somewhere deep in the savannah, a story was written that no human camera could fully capture, a story where the wild itself reached across its divides to save one of its own. The righteous care for the needs of their animals, but the kindest acts of the wicked are cruel. She's exhausted, but she be wild again, if we are quick, if we are precise. Aisha's voice was low, steady, the kind of tone that kept hands from shaking in moments that mattered most. Habir, all efficiency wrapped in quiet urgency, swung open the back compartment of the vehicle. The sun flashed against the steel jaws of the specialized hydraulic cutter he pulled free, a tool built to bite through the toughest materials nature never made. Dust swirled in the hot air, clinging to their skin, the smell of dry earth mixing with the faint tang of machine oil. Aisha, kneeling with practiced grace, loaded a dart with a carefully measured sedative enough to quiet, but not to harm. Her hands were steady as stone, her breathing measured with each click of the syringe. The rifle came to her shoulder. Her amber eyes locked on the lioness's heaving flank. The shot whispered through the air, the dart finding its mark in Zura's tawny flesh. A startled roar escaped the lioness, not the mighty thunder she once commanded, but a rough, guttural cry that trembled in the heat. Slowly the sedative began its work. Her muscles softened, her fierce frame sinking into the earth, eyelids heavy as if burdened by years rather than hours of suffering. The savannah itself seemed to hush as though it understood the sacredness of this moment. Even the wind paused. Aisha approached first, her boots pressing gentle prints into the grass. Habir followed, the cutter cradled in his arms like something precious. They moved around the sleeping queen with a reverence reserved for holy places. The air was thick, not just with tension, but with the weight of understanding that this was more than rescue, it was redemption. Javier positioned the cutter's jaws against the cruel rubber ring, the sharp grating noise of the blades slicing through silence. The sound seemed almost too loud in this cathedral of grass and sky. The tire fought back, years of hardened rubber refusing to yield, but the cutter's jaws were relentless. Aisha kept her palm on Zura's side, her thumb gently tracing the rhythm of the lioness's breath, murmuring soft words that bridged the gap between human and wild. Then, with a sudden snap that echoed like the breaking of a chain, the tire split. Javier drew the two halves away with careful hands, revealing raw, angry grooves in her golden coat. The damage was deep, but not fatal. Aisha worked quickly, spraying a cool antiseptic over the wounds, the mist catching the sunlight like morning dew. Zura stirred, eyes fluttering open, glazed, groggy, yet already brighter without the weight of her prison. She blinked at Aisha, then at Javier, and finally at Quito, who still stood at a respectful distance, his massive form silhouetted against the horizon like a silent guardian carved from the earth. The lioness rose slowly at first, her legs trembling, testing the strength that had been stolen from her. Then she took a step, then another, her movements growing sure, the queen reclaiming her throne. She turned once, her amber eyes locking with those of her rescuers, holding them in. A moment thick with unspoken gratitude. And then a leap. A powerful defiant bound into the tall grass, the sunlight rippling across her back like a benediction. From the distant trees, shadows moved. Her pride emerged, drawn by her scent, the chorus of chuffs and low rumbles swelling like a song of homecoming. They surrounded her, brushing muzzles, rubbing flanks, the joy of reunion carrying across the plains. It was the kind of scene that made the world stop, where every heartbeat, every breath, every blade of grass seemed to lean into the truth unfolding, that even in a world filled with division, connection is still possible. He heals the broken-hearted and binds up their wounds. Yet this was more than a single rescue. This was the story of an unlikely alliance. A gorilla who felt the pain of another species and sought help, rangers who trusted that plea and stepped into the unknown, and a lioness whose life now stood as living proof of what compassion can do. It was Quito's empathy that bridged worlds, Aisha and Javier's courage that turned risk into salvation, and Zura's resilience that carried her back to the wild where she belonged. But it was also a mirror, reflecting the quiet truth we often ignore, that the harm we cause the earth is rarely intentional, but always consequential. A discarded tire, something tossed away without thought, became a trap that nearly claimed the queen. How many others suffer unseen? How many wounds in the wild bear the fingerprints of our carelessness? This is not meant to drown us in guilt, but to awaken us to power, the power of small choices made with awareness. A tire recycled instead of abandoned. A plastic bottle refused, a hand extended instead of withdrawn. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Defend the rights of the poor and needy, because every ripple matters. Every act of care, no matter how small, travels further than we imagine. Somewhere in the heart of the savannah tonight, Zura walks free under the same moonlight that touches your skin. Her pride surrounds her. Quito returns to his forest, his work done. And the wind carries a story, one of hope, of connection, of the truth that the wild and we are not separate, but threads in the same woven tapestry. If this story reached you, know that countless others wait to be told. Stories where danger meets courage, where fear meets kindness, where the wild finds its way home. Like, share, and let this moment live beyond the screen. Because the next life saved could be because you chose to listen when the wild called. The sun had begun its slow descent, spilling molten gold across the plains when Zura disappeared into the tall grass, free at last. Her pride's voices rose in greeting, their chuffs and rumbling purrs like a choir of the wild, wrapping her in the embrace she had fought so hard to return to. Every step she took now was light, unburdened. Her muscles rolled beneath her golden coat, no longer bound, no longer in pain. She paused once, looking back across the distance, toward the two rangers standing by their vehicle, and the great gorilla whose dark eyes still followed her. That look was more than thanks. It was an acknowledgement, a recognition that, across the vast differences of shape and language, compassion had found a common tongue. Kito remained still, his silhouette framed by the falling light. In that moment, he was not just a gorilla. He was the bridge between two worlds that so often stand apart. Without him, Zura's story might have ended in silence and dust. But because he had chosen empathy over fear, a queen still walked her kingdom. Aisha and Javier exchanged quiet smiles, the kind you don't plan. The kind that come from knowing you've been part of something far bigger than yourself. They had risked, they had trusted, and they had been rewarded with a memory that would outlast them. As the wind swept gently across the savannah, it carried away the scent of blood and rubber, replacing it with the clean smell of grass and freedom. Somewhere in the distance, a lioness's roar rose, no longer weak, no longer weary, but strong, resonant, alive. It rolled across the land, bouncing off hills, threading through trees, and even reaching the ears of Quito, who turned his great head toward the sound. He blinked slowly as though satisfied, before turning back into the shadows of his forest, his part in the story complete. And so, the plains returned to their rhythm, but they were not quite the same. Because here, on this day, a gorilla too, humans and a lioness had rewritten what it means to be connected. The tire had been man's mistake, but the rescue had been man's redemption. And perhaps that is the truest heartbeat of the wild. The way it allows us, again and again, to heal the harm we've caused, if only we are willing to try. The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the goat, and a little child shall lead them.